Well, let's get started anyway. So Richard will be joining us shortly. So obviously a huge week this week. Not only did we have the presidential election yesterday, the stock popped at least 14% today, and we have the Feds might do something with the rates tomorrow. So today, let's talk about how exactly could Elon work with the government if he does set up the Department of Government Efficiency. Is he a consultant? Is he actually a government official? Maybe even a cabinet member? What is going to happen with how he runs his companies? What's going to happen with conflict of interest? We're going to have Richard Hoffman join us later. He's a lawyer who's, not in this space per se, but he's got a lot to share about, just give us some thinking about how this might work. So let's start with that. I mean, Alexandra, why don't you kick us off? This is a conversation we had last week. Has anything changed in your mind based on what has happened last night and what have you heard recently?
No, nothing changed what I said last week, and I just try to sum that up quickly. I don't think Elon will take an official government position. I think he doesn't have the mindset to do that, to sit through hours and hours of meetings. He's a doer and not a participator or administrator. And also it would be a flagrant issue with conflict of interests to all his companies, SpaceX, Tesla, even Neuralink, boring tunnel. I mean, any of his companies who may need the slightest permit may be concerned by something that he heard in any of those meetings. So I don't think he will be in an official position where he is sitting there listening to it. But I do believe he will be the most influential whisperer of the Trump initial period of presidency. I mean, how long that will last, I have no idea. I mean, these are two alpha men, and I'm really, I'm not sure this is gonna last forever. But while it lasts, I'm sure he has the biggest influence, probably even as big as Trump's himself on these matters. And he will have what's normally called straw men who are actually sitting there and executing for him and are going through those meetings. So I don't think he will have an official position. I do believe, however, that is going to be a vulnerability. I do believe his political and business opponents will use this, and any sentence he says, any post he puts on X that is, directional as a proof that he's actually having much more influence than his advisor role, or however you want to call it, would give him. So this is going to be, he's not going to be out of the fire of public cross-examination, I think I want to call it. So but again, I don't believe he will have an official role. And I'm looking forward to actually have Richard's view on that. And the other thing that I would like to ask Richard, and please remind me if I forget, is Tesla was supposed to file about 3 weeks ago, latest, the procedure that allows them to officially leave Delaware. You know that on June 13th, we voted on the shareholder package and some other stuff on the shareholder meeting. And on the 14th, our decision to incorporate in Texas was officialized by incorporating in Texas, but then you still have to leave Delaware. And so that leaving Delaware procedure is something that usually has to be initiated in 120 days after that. So 14th of June, 120 days would bring us to middle of October. We're now beginning of November. So I've been looking around for any information on that, haven't found anything. So one question I want to ask Richard later when he joins us is whether he knows. Oh, there he is in the audience. Herbert, I don't know how to pull him up, but maybe you can do that.
Yeah, I got it. I just invited him. So while we're waiting for him to join, what does the panel members think? Do you think that Elon has already an idea of how exactly he's going to work with the government? Or is he just going to just assume that there's going to be lawsuits and he'll just take it? Who wants to start there, Xander or Xander? Yeah, Xander.
Yeah, I think that he's just going to be like a consultant that's going to examine the P&L of a business. Like just come in, offer his opinions on where where to cut, what, maybe make some proposals on, like he's been doing with the 2-year wind down period. I think I heard him mention yesterday that they'll just be compensated and they can go and get another job and make extra money during that period. So it seems like there's just the off ramp to uh, how do you save $2 trillion. That's it. He's just going to consult that. I don't think, and as he's mentioned, that he's not looking for compensation or credit. So it just seems like it's just he likes the title. They're going to give him a pretend title, and then he'll advise.
Simon?
And as for the companies, I don't think there's going to be much impact. We've seen these accusations that he's got time to play video games, for crying out loud, and I know how beneficial it is to him. But like he has more than enough time for what he does. He's a decision maker. He's not rolling up his hands and rolling up his sleeves and doing the work with his own hands.
Great. And Simon, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, thanks, Herbert. I think he's gonna if he's asked or called upon, which he will, to do the job, he'll do the same as he has with his other companies. He's not in there doing the day to day. He just makes the big decisions, and it doesn't take a tremendous amount of his time. So I think he'll come in and say, here's what we should do. And if it works, and to Alexandra's point is, look, I'm hoping this will work. But, the last time you had, 2 alpha males in there, I think that Donald Trump's cabinet now, or the people that, I think this is going to be different than Donald Trump 1.0. I think the people that he's surrounded himself with are quite intelligent, real leaders, and he's going to be leaning on them as he's become more mature, and he's getting older, but he's still excited about what he's doing. So I think Elon can have an input. I just don't think it's going to take as much time. I hope that he comes in and whacks. I'd love for that to happen up here in Canada. But yeah, and then in terms of, I think I would just make this analogy. How will Tesla benefit from a Trump administration? Elon has been going into work every day for the last 4 years, and the Democrats have tied one hand behind his back, and they said, go, be productive. And he's done the best that he can, because they're doing everything they can to hold him back. And now his hands are untied, and I think, he has the ability to do tremendous things without the distractions of the DOJ and this lawsuit, and just the nonsense and shenanigans that have gone on in the last 4 years. So I don't think we can completely understand or realize the benefits, but we'll see it over the next 4 years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Simon and Xander. So we have Richard Hoffman here. He's a lawyer. He does not cover the government, doesn't have necessarily any special knowledge about it, but I spoke to him earlier and he had a really good way to put everything in framework. Richard, can you kind of repeat what you said at our earlier space that we did? You shared a little bit of all the different ways that Elon could approach this, what would get him to trouble, what won't. Go ahead and just share your info.
Sure. So part of this is, or most of it is kind of guesswork. So I'd like to lay that out before I start. So it depends on what his role is and what his decision-making ability is. So if he's like an advisor and he goes and has lunch once a month and he says, this is what I suggest, and that's the extent of it, I don't think there's a problem at all. I think that's commonplace done, and there's nothing exceptional about it. I think the issue arises when he has decision-making ability. And he's dealing with federal employees, and these are public employees, so it's different than dealing with a private company. With dealing with federal employees, they have special rights, and you can't terminate them without all kinds of notice. And based upon their longevity with the government, they're entitled to more notice. So, to some degree, the way the system is set up, it's not really consistent with the way he would like to operate. Now, one thing that could happen in the meantime that could change all this is there's certain regulations, there's ethics regulations, for example, and I'll talk about that in a second. And there's other regulations, and those could be modified while he's and I'm going to use the term consultant for the sake of discussion. They could be modified, and everything I say could change, and that might be the solution to the problem. But what the real issue is, to the extent his involvement becomes greater, then the issue becomes when, for example, a contract comes up with SpaceX and he's cutting the FAA. Is there a conflict of interest, and can he act, and can the contract be let like that? And the other issue that would arise and is under the, and I'm not an expert on this, but there's, of course, there's some big manual that's called the Standard of Ethical Conduct Summary for Executive Branch Employees. And this would be if, to the extent if he had more, and again, this is the way I see it, this is all opinion, but to the extent he had more decision-making ability. And when you look at the way the standards are for conducting oneself in the federal government, anything that can be construed as providing a benefit, a special benefit to you because of your position with the government is a violation of those rules. And so, for example, if you went to the NHTSA and you wanted to get certain regulations passed to enhance your ability to use full self-driving, is that a violation of the ethical rules? Could be. We don't know that. And that's not really relevant at this point in time because under the Trump administration, nobody's going to obviously give him any hassles for whatever he does. But the problem is the statute of limitations on violations of the ethical rules is 5 years. So if he came to me and we were talking about this, my concern would be future administration, not a Republican administration, and they have a hard on for him and they want to go after him year 5. And he could theoretically face that. Now, I don't think he would care, to be honest. I think he will do whatever he thinks is right and best for the country. But it's a much more complicated scenario than him just cutting employees at Tesla because at Tesla, it's his business. He can do what he chooses. In the White House, it's not him. He's just an agent or a extremity of the government, and he doesn't have that same ability to make the calls. And obviously, the other difference is to the extent that he wants to go in there and cut 10 million employees, the government might face 10 million lawsuits, and there might be a bunch of Congress people who are on short 2-year terms that are running for Congress starting today who don't want their constituents to lose their jobs or have any other negative consequences. So I think it's a pretty complicated scenario based upon the extent he decides he wants to be a decision maker.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. That was fantastic. Is there any other options for him? Like I think earlier I'd asked you, could he assign a third party, like Alexander was saying? He just assigns a person who represents him, and then he still stays the CEO of his companies, and then he's kind of teaching this person what to say and where to go. Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a possibility. It's all subjective. It would probably be based upon whether or not he had control over that person, and and we could distinguish between, for example, if he has an employee of a Tesla acting in that capacity, then there would be an argument to be made that he might have more control over an employee of Tesla versus some third party that has no connection to Tesla or any of the companies and can operate independently. And if that's the case, and he's just offering his opinions to this third party, but doesn't have any control over the decision making, I think that's a viable way for him to have input directly without exposing himself to potential conflicts and the nonsense of governmental suits.
Do you guys think that he's already figured out how this would all work? Or do you think that only after the election, now that it's here, he's sitting here, okay, how would I actually set this up and what am I going to ask for?
Well, I would expect he's got a lot of lawyers on payroll. I would think that was a project probably he put out once he decided he was going to be campaigning for Trump, and once they had that discussion when it became public about what his potential position would be, I would bet that he had counsel decide to look at the issue and give him proposals on what would be the best way to approach it. That doesn't mean that those are, guarantees that they would not be challenged, but I'm sure he thought it out or his counsel thought it out before today.
Richard, if you were the counsel for him, which way would you recommend him? Would you say that he should quit these companies, or would you say that he should, use a third party or some other model?
Well, I think he's invaluable to all the enterprises. So if I had a choice, I would tell him to find somebody that he found trustworthy, that would pass the test, to communicate with that person, and to let them handle it. Alternatively, if he that wasn't good enough for him because he wanted to get really directly involved, then the safest way to proceed would be to take a time out from his businesses and completely cut himself off from the businesses. It's kind of the reverse. For example, so once President Trump takes office in January, all his assets have to be in a blind trust, and he can't take any actions against as to them. Theoretically, kind of cutting yourself off from your businesses is kind of a similar process whereby you kind of cleanse yourself and you're protected. So I would do one or the other, but my preference, my strong preference would be for him to remain day to day involved in the companies as opposed to day to day involved in the government, notwithstanding what his preference would be.
Yeah, we'll assume that that is what happens. That he does have to quit the companies. He becomes an actual, government employee, member. What would happen to Tesla and the Tesla stock? What do you guys think, Alexander, Rob? Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Question is, how much can he actually cut? Because a good chunk of the budget is defense. How much is he really going to be able to cut there? A good part of it is entitlements, Social Security, and Medicare, stuff like that. How are they going to cut there? It's a mess. And then there's a bigger problem for all of us to discuss for years. Um, we're about to see a decimation of the auto industry worldwide, other than Chinese. I don't think people feel better than BMW sales are down. There's VW just closed 3 plants and laid off 30,000 people, and nobody is doing well in China other than Tesla. And so, how is Trump going to thread the needle of supporting Detroit and all of America, all that represents, and Elon and Tesla. Um, it's an interesting problem that he's going to have to face, and if he doesn't badly, he could throw us into a real recession or worse.
Yeah, it's hard to hear you, Robert. I think your setup is not as good as it normally is. Let's ask it, James. Do you want to come up? James, can you hear us? Okay. We have Jeff Lutz. You're back. Thank you. I'm sure you didn't catch a lot, but we have Richard here explaining a lot of different scenarios. You want to give just your thinking of how would Elon and Trump, how would they work together? What could be the issues? And you can also ask Richard questions if you want.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Beautiful.
Yeah. Briefly, I just heard the last question. I mean, he can cut a lot. You the and I been in positions where I've had large budgets, both in not only people and operations, indirect procurement, but also direct procurement. And that's the way you have to think about these things. The government has a lot of people. The government buys a lot of stuff. The government buys a lot of stuff to do government work, and then the government buys a lot of product. And in each one of those transactions is where, if you take, you look at like the Tesla approach to procurement, both direct and indirect. Remember, direct is like Tesla buying, metal. Indirect is Tesla buying cafeteria services or something. If you look at the approach and how they do, ABC accounting, they do should costing. There are professional procurement approaches to how do you get to the lowest cost, and how do you figure out the actual margins the other side of the transaction is garnering. And then you literally sit down in a transparent way and say, well, look, I dissected your business up and down. I believe I know what you're making in terms of margin. This is what I think is fair, and let's figure this out. Those are like the best companies that buy, billions of dollars of material per year. That's how they operate. You can't just go in and like sling negotiations back and forth and think you're getting to the lowest cost, because you're not. So there's a structured way to do that. So if I were to like step out of 5,000 feet above this, there are people in the government, millions. There are procurement transactions on the direct and indirect side, that are probably in the many hundreds, if not trillions of dollars. And that's where he can go in and influence from a cost structure perspective. It doesn't mean just because it's Medicare, just because it's whatever, like it's hands off. No, you have to go into each one of those operations and say, what are they buying? How many people are doing the work? How efficient is this work being done? Could this work be done with less people? And could you get the same outcome the same way he runs his companies? So, and it is different when you're dealing with, a private company versus the government, in terms of how you deal with people, how you deal with their employment disposition. But I mean, all those terms and things can be known up front. And I think that's one of the reasons, Elon, I think one of the big concerns is like, how would you transition this many people out of the public sector and do it in a way that wouldn't cause like mass uprising? And that's why you've heard Elon throw out like 2-year severances, which is not totally uncommon, especially for long tenured people. And when you do that, and you can figure out a way to like to get people transitioned out, you get the cost structure benefits right away, because you know what your new run rate is. And then you take a special, just like how private companies do, you take a kind of a special charge up front. That's the thing they want to solve for. It's not like tomorrow the government needs $100 billion or it's insolvent. It's more like, no, it needs to start spending, $2 to $3 trillion less per year pretty quickly. And can you get to a run rate that looks like that? So those are my thoughts on the topic. And the thing that is not clear to me is, how does he do that, and how do you maintain how do you maintain the separation between his private companies and his investments? He has hundreds of billions of dollars invested in his private companies, in public companies. How does he separate that from the government? I'm sure that's what Richard was stepping through options earlier.
Yep, that's what he was doing. Does it make a difference? I know some people were saying that, hey, as president only, there's really not a lot they can do. A lot of legislation needs to be passed through Congress or through Senate. So tell me what this means. They flipped the Senate, Republicans flipped the Senate, and I think the House is still up for grabs right now. But what does that mean?
He's got a mandate. So yes, there is a process and procedure for some things, and yes, there's some approvals that are needed. But I mean, he's got tremendous credibility. And then it depends on how many additional seats they actually get in Congress. There's a big difference between a two vote majority and a 17 vote majority, right? But I mean, that'll play out over the next, I guess, week or two, the way Congress elections go. But that'll be interesting. If they have a significant seat majority, then there's a lot of stuff that they're going to be able to to get through and get done. And, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, the whole mechanics though, of how does he execute it? Because again, if he is if he's driving the framework and driving the question is, does he set up the decision framework and the process, or is he going in and making individual decisions? And I think that's where it can get really sticky, even if he's doing it through a cutout, like some third person. If he's still, if they can be directly traced back to his decision making, that's where it becomes difficult. That's why I didn't see another way out of him not taking a sabbatical,
Yeah.
and then figuring out how to put his investments in some sort of I don't know, blind trust or something where you can't influence the performance of it one way or another.
That's what I was asking you. So you're still leaning on that direction. So if he does do that, what is the impact to Tesla if he takes off, let's say 6 months? What if he takes off for a year? What would happen to Tesla and the stock?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Obviously, I think from a headline risk perspective, and in the short term, it there could be some impact, right? But I I don't think it was a coincidence that 4 VPs were elevated in the last 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe it's a total coincidence, maybe it isn't, but I think that's part of the story. He's built a great. I'm not worried about Tesla executing. I mean, look at he kind of I wouldn't say he took a physical sabbatical. I mean, he was clearly involved with Tesla and articulating the vision for what we're seeing play out now when he was going through the Twitter acquisition. But um, so he was CEO in name, but even he himself said he was really stretched then. And now, you put this on top of it. So again, I've never been the one to say, look, I know how to manage his schedule, or he doesn't have X amount of time for this or that. He certainly has uh, demonstrated that he has an ability for excellence across all these companies. Um, it's more of a question of this is a question of process. This is a question of conflict of interest, and this is a question of how do you do it and not just literally get perennially sued, nonstop. So I mean,
Right.
yeah.
I'd like to ask the question in this framework, okay? What is the impact to society? What's the impact to the business? What's the impact to on a legal basis, right? So we can ask Richard what the impact is on legal basis. But for example, society. My argument would be he has said this is existential. We need to solve the government debt. If we don't, inflation will go, and the company there won't be a society to support. On the other hand, if he leaves Tesla and they don't develop the humanoid bots as fast as he could have done it, the humanoid bots themselves is one solution to the economic crisis. It's one solution to society's benefit, right? So which one of those, in terms of society, would he lean towards? It's sounding like he's saying that the most important thing is, getting into government, and that's why he feels this is so critical to him. And then in terms of business, which one is the best to not impact Tesla? Because it's a crucial year for Tesla. This 2026, 2025, three vehicles at least being produced. You've got the bot is about to go to ready to start its scaling. You got robotaxi. This has to go out correctly and really well. And then there's the legal thing. So why don't we start with that, Richard? With the legal thing, which is the more thornier legal scenario? Him leaving Tesla, or him like staying in Tesla and just getting, regardless of what he does, he's going to get sued like crazy. Which one will he be able to tolerate more?
Well, the one where he has more involvement. I don't know if it has to be one of the situations it really, to me, depends if he's a decision maker or not. That's kind of really the defining role, and it really doesn't make a difference what his capacity is. But I was going to mention something that I forgot to mention that I think is another thing that he would have to consider. I think he would have to consider insider trading issues. If and this is the way I was thinking about it. If he's dealing with with NHTSA about regulations for self-driving in his capacity related to the government, it would restrict his ability to trade the stock. But not only that, but anybody who came into contact, who ended up trading in the stock, might have an issue with regard trading on some kind of insider information. And that could last the entirety of his affiliation with the government. So I think in light of that and that concern, and with all the other concerns that I mentioned, I still think the setup that gets him the least amount of risk and he could still have the same amount of input is having a third party act on his behalf, unaffiliated with Tesla.
Okay. And then what about the society, guys? Which one do you guys think is, where do you think he's leaning? That the government issue is the bigger issue, I got to solve that? Or, let's go and do autonomous driving and the bots, that's going to help society more than what the government is causing.
Why not both?
Keep going. How does he do both?
I mean, I just like I don't think he's going to prioritize solving the balance sheet issues of the government over his missions and his duties to his companies. And so I ultimately think that he'll just render his opinion, and the Doge title is nothing more than just a meme thingy. He's just gonna he's just gonna whisper in his ear. That's about it. I just, what else do you need from him?
Hey, Stock Talk, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Wanted to ask you this question because it was one of the posts that I really liked, asking earlier on X, which is that now I can't remember his name. So basically, the question was, because Jason DeBolt asked the question. Now that this occurred, this presidential election happened, a significant amount of risk just vanished overnight. And he says, might as well get in on Tesla while it's still below $300 per share. Not sure how much longer this discount will last. So then I asked the question, Tesla stock risk is much reduced. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't just give a direct yes or no answer to that question. I think generally yes, but I think not for the reasons people think. I think people think it's being de-risked as a business. It's not being de-risked as a business. It's being de-risked as a proxy to Elon Musk. And I think the reaction today in the markets was very, very telling of that. Okay. So if you look today at the markets this morning, everything was up, or it seemed like that if you looked at the indexes. Then you looked under the surface today, and what happened? Solar stocks had their worst day of the year. Vehicle charging stocks had their worst day of the year. Hydrogen stocks had their worst day of the year. They were down 29, 30, 40. I mean, SunNova was down 50% on the day on no company specific news, just on the outcome of the election. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that the market doesn't believe that Donald Trump is going to become magically pro clean energy overnight, at least to the extent that he'll make trillions of dollars available to that sector the way that the Democrats did with the IRA and other clean energy subsidies. But at the same time, with every EV stock down, every solar stock down, every hydrogen stock down, every alternative energy stock down, even alternative fuel stocks down huge today, Tesla was up 15%. So as an investor or a trader, that'd make you scratch your head and say, well, why was Tesla stock up when every related industry stock was down? And the answer to that is because Elon has done a masterclass once again by just sticking his toes into the political arena, and now the stock is a proxy to his political influence as well. So the stock is this is a stock that, in my view, has not traded on a fundamental basis for really 5 years. When I bought the stock in 2015, I think from 2015, 2016 to 2019, I think it traded on the fundamental optimism of the growth in volume and the fundamental optimism of the clean energy initiative in general. If you could rewind your clocks back to that time, that was really when hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars were being poured into clean energy, not only from the private sector, from the public sector as well. And it created a huge premium for that industry, and Tesla was the leading American company in that industry. And I think they got a fundamental bid because of that, for at least 4 to 5 years of the stock's history. But in the last 5 years, I think the stock has become a proxy to Elon's success. And I think there's a number of anecdotes to this. How many times have we seen a successful SpaceX launch or project, and the next day Tesla stock is up on no news? That's the market telling you that it views this stock as a vehicle to have exposure to Elon Musk, because it is the primary public vehicle by which to do so. And for the Financial Times wrote an article this morning, and they said that they believe that Elon Musk may end up as the most powerful political advisor in United States history at the outset of this election. And as bold as that statement is, I don't think it's far-fetched. As much influence as Elon has as the wealthiest man in the world, and in my view, the probably the best innovator of our generation, if not of all time, the influence that gives him from the standpoint of influencing the opinions of others in his industries is already enormous. But now, post the outcome of this election and what is looking like it could be a red sweep, we don't have the full House results yet, but they're projected to win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, obviously. And so in that kind of scenario, that really gives Elon, a much more open-ended ticket to influence policy. And I think that that's a good thing for Tesla shareholders. I think it's a good thing for anyone that's exposed to Elon, frankly. He's likely going to end up 4 years from now much wealthier than he is today, and his companies are probably going to end up much larger than they are today. And let's keep in mind, I'm not saying that Elon needs this political vehicle to be successful. He absolutely doesn't. He got to where he is without really being involved in politics at all, frankly. At least not directly, for a long time. And so this is the first election where he's picked up an accelerant to his success. And I think that that's massively bullish for Tesla stock, for Elon, for SpaceX, for Neuralink, and for all of his other companies as well. And from a risk premium standpoint, what you were mentioning about taking the risk out of the equation, yeah, I think it takes an enormous amount of political risk out of the equation. But I also think it grants a political tailwind as well, which is that Elon happens to operate in cutting edge industries. And one of the number one risks associated with cutting edge industry is government headwinds and regulation. And he's now in the driver's seat by which to maybe not directly manipulate those policies, but at least find ways to easily circumvent them as a result of his political influence. So, SpaceX, highly regulated industry, tons of potential government headwinds based on who's in charge. Tesla, same thing. Neuralink, same thing. These are cutting edge industries where there's a ton of government money available. There's a ton of new government legislation that needs to be passed to really spell the order of the law in these industries. And Elon now has a ticket to influence all of those things. So,
But fucked up.
yeah,
There's an argument to be made that the opposite can happen because you have gotten yourself right into government, whatever, right in front of them, right in there. You can't at this point. It becomes pretty obvious that you are doing things. It's much easier to influence when you're outside of the government than
I
if
don't
you're
agree with
inside.
that.
Okay.
I think that we think of it that way as like an onlooking public. I think we're lulled into thinking of it that way, that like every whisper of policy change that happens under the surface, is going to be forecasted and displayed to the public. I don't think Washington works that way. I'm not a political expert, but I think the backbone of influence in American politics for the last 30 or 40 years has certainly been lobbying. And most of those moves are not known at all to the public. And so, is Elon going to, in effect, become a lobbyist? In a way, but probably the most powerful lobbyist of all time. And his ability to influence policy change will be enormous. It will be enormous. And I don't think it will be forecasted. I don't think people are going to, I don't think he's going to advertise the phone calls that he has with Trump. And I don't think Trump's going to advertise those phone calls either. So I think it will be, he'll have the ability to whisper in Trump's ear for the next 4 years, and I think that that's a good thing, not only for his companies, but I
Okay.
think it's a good thing for the
That's
economy.
that's if Trump listens to him, because this is coming directly from what is it now? This analysis by, I can't remember who it is. Anyway, Benchmark. They said if there's a Trump win and U.S. Congress majority, here's what they project to happen: the EV tax credit will be repealed. The EV charging investment program is going to be repealed. There's going to be the funding for the regulations to support broader energy mix and fossil fuel industry will be eased, right? So the regulations they'll actually support the fossil fuel industry more. The EPA emission targets beyond 2032, there won't be any more new introduction of that. They'll ease that out. And then there's going to be more hawkish foreign and trade policy towards China, increased tariffs and imports from China and Mexico, right? So what's going to happen there? Investments into China and out of China will be reduced. And then I think most people believe that the critical mineral cooperation and supply will still be kept because that is a national security. But all of this sounds kind of not good for Tesla. What does the panel members think about this?
Well, I'll just weigh into those. I don't know. I feel like I'm on an island on this. I don't know. And I think just people are thinking clearly. I will be shocked if battery factories in Kansas, Texas, Nevada, some of these are swing states, they're all red or they're swing states, but they're just going to just close down and evaporate. The Tennessee blue oval stuff, all this stuff's going to evaporate. I doubt that that's going to happen. And also the existing factories that are already built there, Panasonic and so forth, like these things are just going to they're just going to go away. There's no way. And so just because I think everybody's just getting they're kind of just swept up in like what's happening and like, oh, the Republicans are in there, all this stuff's getting repealed. No, the US wants to make batteries. They want to build stuff, they want to make stuff. And those factories are under construction or complete or they're already in production. There's no way that the support for those things are going to fade. So that is the side of the IRA that says we will help you if you build your factory and you set up your operation in the US. And Trump has said that himself on many occasions, including, by the way, foreign governments coming in, much less US entities that are building up. So all these stocks today, I saw US solar stocks, I saw US battery storage stocks getting hammered. That is a bad trade. If you panicked and got out because of that, they were getting all swept up into a category. But the stuff that, US battery storage, that is going to be a very healthy business. And guess what? It's going to get healthier because what's actually going to happen as the 100 and 200% plus tariffs are going to go on China. May not go on South Korea because they're a good trading partner, but we'll see. Trump did put tariffs on washing machines out of Korea, Samsung and LG. It's all dependent on the industry and our ability to compete. So I just see the battery side of this thing, with Tesla, with other companies like that, and solar. I just see that a completely different way. And then just back to the other conversation. I don't know how you half bake or half ass go in and restructure the entire cost structure of the US government. If it's a 6 trillion run rate and you are publicly advertising that you're going to slice out 2 trillion of it out of the run rate, I don't know how you do that via whispering. I just don't know how you do it.
Hey,
So you think it's going to be he's going to have to be more vocal and public about it?
Yeah, because I've been on both sides of this where I've had the people, I've had the operation, and I've had to go in and make some gigantic reduction because then you have to be part of the how is it going to run in the future? Otherwise, because if you come in as the consultant, sometimes you can say a bunch of stuff and he has tremendous credibility, but I don't know. It's just there's a big difference between suggesting things versus having more of an accountable ownership role and have it being received. And I think the other different element of this is the second term administration, and I think he's going to be worried about his legacy. Both are going to be worried about their legacy, Elon and Trump. So anyway, which I think could make him do some bolder things, to be honest with you. But it's not like he's got to worry a little bit less about himself being reelected, but I know he wants the party to continue to go on. Anyway, just my macro point is, I don't know how when if you have a 6 trillion run rate, just put whatever number in front of it, and you're saying you're going to cut a third of it. I think you could whisper your way through of it if you're committing to like a 5% reduction or something. But if you're saying you're going to go in and cut a third, I think it's a much bigger,
I mean, but a lot of this is
broader conversation.
speculation, right? Like, I mean, he hasn't gotten in the position. Like,
Yeah, all of it is.
yeah, I mean, yeah, right. Because Elon hasn't sat down with the government books yet, if that's what he's going to end up doing. And so, when he does that, he may realize, okay, that might be a little overstated. And look, on the Trump tariff thing, I think that's also kind of also the effect, right? Like, we're speculating a little bit on the commentary he's given. He said he wants to use tariffs as a policy tool. That's effectively what he said. Okay. And, yeah, he's thrown some numbers out there, but, in all fairness, I don't think he was trying to have those numbers be taken literally or say that's certainly what the policy is going to end up being. The point is I think he wants to use tariffs as a tool of leverage, and I'm not sure they'll be used in as widespread or sweeping of a fashion as a lot of people think they're going to be used. I think he's going to use them, and again, I'm speculating too when I say this, but I think he's going to use them more selectively as a tool for having leverage in negotiations with a lot of our trade partners. But Alexandra, sorry, go for it.
No problem. Thanks a lot. A second time, Jeff, that I really disagree with you on 2 points. First of all, I think both Trump and Elon couldn't care less about their reputation. They really feel on a mission. So I don't think, they're taking now precautions or feel like, this is a second term, let's be nice or what. I don't think any of that is true. I think they're very determined.
I wasn't saying that. I was saying it's the second term, meaning he has a mandate.
Oh yeah, he clearly has a mandate. I think both of them are mandates. So maybe I misunderstood you, but then we agree on that. But I do believe they will be hyper focused, and this will be a relatively quick setup. But, and that's where my but comes, nothing in government moves quickly. I mean, there is congressional approval that are needed. There are committees needed. There is, you can't even fire people without having gone through all that. This is not only about personnel reduction, but if you compare it to what he does when he does his 10% cuts in Tesla, that's not at all how it works. So I don't think he wants this role where he then has to execute it. I think he just wants to be the one that gives the initial idea, has his strawman, I called him, I don't find a better word today, sitting there and executing, coming back, checking on it, and making sure the pressure keeps on. What he does, when you listen to how the Cybertruck was built and how Lars told us these episodes when he comes back and cuts them the time they are allocated or gives them even higher ambitious goals, I think that's exactly what he's going to do, and he is perfect at that, and they fear him much more if he's not constantly there. So I really don't think he's gonna have an official role, and I really don't think he's gonna have to resign from any position.
Jeff, you're not alone. I'm gonna speak to both of your points. Number one, qualitative and quantitative assessment. So for every single department within the US government, is it a high impact, medium impact, or low impact? If it's high impact, it should be obvious right away that you need to be pretty careful on how you cut the budget. If it's medium, you just go for it, but monitor it closely. And if it's low, you just go for it and you say, any request for more money or more budget or more personnel needs to be approved. And that's standard Elon approach. It's what he did at X. He got rid of 80% of the personnel and then he hired back, but he hired back where it was needed and where it could be proven. Number two, not second point, but part of the initial point, when you're in a Tesla factory, when I see the videos at Gig of Austin, there's an entire board of KPIs. Well, imagine the same thing for the US government, the 450 or however many departments there are. Every single one of them has a board of KPIs with objectives of what needs to happen, and it's being monitored constantly. So if you're an employee or staff, that's your focus, is getting it down, and the primary objective is to facilitate the American people and the American government, the country as a whole, prospering. So the whole dynamic, the whole mindset changes. And then in terms of the personnel, Jeff had laid this out beautifully. Most of the budget isn't going to be for people for these various departments. It's what they're spending, wasting money on. So if you give people a 2-year furlough where they either take their 2-year salary and retrain or what have, or find another job, or if they're into the mission and they're passionate about it, they get trained in this new methodology of focusing on KPIs and being service oriented and focus on contributing.
Wiggle, want to get you up?
Hey, great discussion. Thanks for having me on. Elon sets ambitious targets because that's how you move the needle and get things done. Otherwise, improvements may not even get started at all. His quote, "We turn impossible into late," comes exactly from that. And he's an accelerator. He can identify inefficiencies and advise on optimizations to the extent of what's legally possible. And he would likely be like a broad policy advisor on spending, like on cuts, spending, and regulations. So he recently mentioned that there are 2 new regulatory agencies created every year, and nothing's being removed. So he'll likely be looking into how we could reduce regulatory red tape. And personally, I think regulations should actually expire themselves and then reviewed upon expiration by the holding agency. And if it's still viable, you review it. And if not, you let it expire. And as for Elon, he has an excellent track record of delivering immense value as a CEO and entrepreneur. So through data, he'd be able to offer policy improvements as an independent observer. That way, he doesn't have to be employed by the government. And for legal aspect of things and conflict of interest, he's constantly sued along with Trump. So the lawfare is not foreign to them. And every policy decision and every advice that he gives could be vetted by their lawyer teams, legal teams, and teams of administration before the action, so that there is no legal implications. And Stock Talk was correct, absolutely right. Like not only was not he involved in the government reaching his success, but the Biden administration turned a blind eye on him and faced enormous regulatory headwinds for his companies being sued and still persevering. So I think I don't think it'll be like an official position, but it'll be like a title which he likes. It's like a meme, like Xander said, because Techno King and Master of Coin, it's just a kind of memes, and I think it kind of falls in the same category.
Nice, well said. So was it you, Xander, or is it? Do you want to go, Robert?
I just don't have the expertise to really dive in on this. One thing I've learned about politics over my career is what happens before the election often pretty deeply changes after the election. And we need a new vision for America. And Elon has the ability to bring that to us. And I think the cutbacks that he talked about on the election trail fit into that. But he needs to figure out how he's going to deal with China. That's the big threat coming to us. And Elon knows what's coming because he's doing war in Shanghai. He's selling a lot of cars right now. He's the only automaker outside of China that is. And so Trump should listen to him deeply
on how to get America's auto industry, if it can be saved at all, saved, and if it can't be, how to shut it down in a way that doesn't throw us into a Great Depression.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think the best case situation and what could happen is that Elon proposes the framework for uh, regulatory cap, so regulation size, for example, and the fact that it's starting with there'll be a graph and there'll be this huge tail, there'll be a million different regulations across the federal government, and if he can propose the framework and process for how regulations are added and how they're removed, and then and then and then Trump and the senior administration and these whatever they bless the process, and then he can step back, and then they vigorously execute the process that he suggests, then that's like the best case, where it's like he establishes just like he establishes the framework for how his companies run. Now he's in the middle of a lot of tactical decision making, as you've seen in the biography and so forth. But his company, when he's not there, his trusted staff, the people he's mentored for 10 plus years, they execute regardless. So that, to me, that's the best case. He establishes the framework on regulations. He establishes the framework on cost cutting, saying this is this is the bar to actually be a job in the federal government. This is how we approach it. And then there's another group that actually goes in and is the decision maker, as Richard referred to it. Because again, I've been in these. By the way, I've been through legal scrubs of situations of like, can you release a certain person or not, and you have to figure out the decision maker and who is and who isn't the decision maker. So but if they can agree, my final point is if he can get his framework blessed off by Trump saying we will do what Elon says, like we will operate and execute to this framework, then I think there's something here. That would be the best case for his businesses, and that would be the best case maybe for the government. I just don't know how you. Again, what I struggle with is how do you cut 2 trillion out and not be deeper into the process? A third of the budget.
Yeah. Go ahead, Xander.
So if Elon was actually invited to the EV summit, I mean, I don't know what happened there, but I imagine he said he didn't want the $7,500 credit. The whole battery, incentivizing batteries to be manufactured on U.S. soil, like I think that kind of makes sense, and I think that's the direction that Trump wants to take it with the whole tariff thing and encouraging U.S. manufacturing. But I think that those kinds of ideas, where Elon did, we used to have the 7,500, then it went away, then it's back. Like I don't think at this point you need incentives for EVs in the United States, but maybe we can argue both, for it or against it. I think the less government interferes with free market, the better. But then at the same time, I do like the idea of manufacturing getting onshored.
But China does subsidize their markets. They force their markets to have the one app long before we don't have a one app yet, and they've pushed EVs into their population much harder than we have in America, and that sets up their market and their factories to be running hot. And that's something to look at here in America. How can we get more Americans to buy EVs? If we don't have the internal market, we can't compete with the Chinese on innovation. Innovation comes from investment, comes from selling product. And we have to have a full-on American dream about electric now.
We're going to move away from that. We're moving away from the government forcing choice on the consumers but I don't think my macro point is I don't think we're moving away from incentivizing manufacturing in the United States. I think we're going to even grow that even stronger. So I think the battery side of the IRA, I think that there's going to be tremendous resistance to repeal some of that. The point of sale side of this, the 7,500 piece, that's the one, that could definitely be under attack. But just remember, the states and the individual states have their own rebate programs, and some of them are up to $4,000 to $7,000 themselves.
I'm not saying to force a choice. I think we need a new dream for all of America to come together and heal. And I think Elon is in a great position to sort of say, hey, here's some places to cut right now. Here's some places to cut in 2 years. Here's some places to cut in 5 or 10. Um, he, he has a place to sort of signal that to us. But I think he can signal a much bigger dream and sort of get us on track, because we need to work together to face China and meet them at their innovation. They're beating us in a lot of places, and we need to have products that match their needs. That's the market that matters to all of us.
Robert, I love what you're saying about the vision, a vision of a completely energy independent America, the manufacturing capital of the world, where we're making all of our energy storage products, our chip manufacturing, this whole revolution that it happens here, that we become the leaders of innovation across the world. That's the vision. And we go to Mars and we go to the moon. We make Star Trek real as a society. We have prosperity because of robots, and everyone owns their own robots. That type of vision of this new world that we can co-create as Americans, I think, is a phenomenal vision. And by opening up the free markets, investors, virtual capitalists, VCs can come in and invest in different things, or continue to invest in different things, whether or not there are government incentives. For example, Elon says, let's get rid of all the incentives for green energy, renewable energy, anything related to that. But similarly, do the same thing with oil exploration and the money that's spent there. So that type of approach.
Yeah, I'm with Robert here. This is global economic warfare. You have robots, you have AI, you have autonomous driving, which will revolutionize economic infrastructure, right? Highways like that, right? It can lower the transportation. Whoever develops this first and deeply embeds it in their country, they have significant global economic power. And so the Chinese are absolutely investing in this. And I think it's very naive for the Americans to say, oh, we don't need the point of sale credit. We don't need the Americans to buy electric vehicles. Electric vehicles become autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles reduce cost of transportation. It makes your products and supply chain better and faster and cheaper. And then you need to invest heavily in the bot industry as well. So, hopefully Elon, using first principles, understands that this is incredibly important for the government of U.S. and that he'll support that. That there are some things that the government should be funding if other governments are funding it as well. That's what I'm saying. And if they're not, then sure, of course, free market. But if other governments are doing this, it's naive.
Yeah, but America was and still is the cradle of innovation. It hasn't given that up to any other country yet. So I think it just has to be held, as a trailblazer, and just continue to support the entrepreneurs and innovation through various incentives.
Herbert,
Well, I mean, the facts don't support that. I mean, the facts are literally every major industry, even going back to the television, we have outsourced that innovation and that manufacturing offshore. So we haven't actually, including the entire supply chain for EV, the entire supply chain for batteries, the entire supply chain for memory, storage, chips, everything we've. So I mean, yeah, we can make all these statements that the U.S. is innovative, and of course, the universe is innovative, but from a legislation and from a yeah, from a legislation perspective and from a private enterprise perspective, we've globalized everything and offshored everything. So we actually have to do a 180.
Yeah, but one of the reasons like it was done is because like certain things are certain manufacturing techniques are like produce a lot of poisonous materials, so they were like shifted outside the United States. And of course the cost savings aspect, but it's not just cost. Like some of it was due to like hazardous implications.
Well, not any industry that I mentioned. I mean, literally the smartphone industry, the silicon
Well, lithium.
chip manufacturing
I
industry,
mean, to an extent, though,
everything.
Jeff, like, I mean, to an extent, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. First off, yes, we did outsource the manufacturing of most things, but I mean, that's the natural progression of economies that are becoming wealthier and wealthier, right? I mean, once your per capita GDP gets high enough, you can't make stuff cost effectively for the rest of the world. And, that's I don't want to say it's a de facto transition, but most of the richest countries in the world have gone through that transition where when when we weren't as wealthy of a country as we are today, when our per capita GDP isn't where it was today, we were a manufacturing powerhouse. And as our labor became more and more expensive and less internationally competitive, other people took that role. China, namely, because of the enormous amount of micro control they have over the economy and the fact that, they were an up and coming economy with a massive population of laborers and just were in the right place at the right time to take the torch of American manufacturing and do that. But one thing I will agree with you on is that the risk of tariffs is misperceived largely because of where we are on the innovation curve. Like if we were having a debate about tariffs as a policy cornerstone 50 years ago, a lot of the concerns that people share today about tariffs with them increasing the cost of everything for Americans would be really well taken, and it would probably be a more I think interesting debate at that time. But right now we're on the eve of robotics and AI, and robotics and AI are the economic hack by which a wealthy nation can return to becoming a manufacturing powerhouse. Because if you think about it logically, right? Why do wealthy nations have a hard time returning to becoming manufacturing powerhouses? Because their labor costs too much, right? Their domestic labor costs too much. But if you can replace domestic labor with fixed cost robots, you break that trend. You break that headwind because now you have cutting edge technology because you're a wealthy nation, and you employ that in the form of fixed cost labor, which has never been like, we think about the steam engine, you think about all previous, industrial style products that were invented. They were all tools that made laborers more efficient. But now we're on the eve of actually replacing labor with fixed cost products, with robots essentially. And that's the hack. That's the hack. That's how the US can use tariffs as a policy, but also have the leverage to keep products affordable in the United States by using fixed cost inputs. But anyway,
Exactly.
But anyway, excellent.
Incentives, tariffs, the whole smorgasbord, they're just toolboxes to get to the vision. But the key thing is having a comprehensive and inclusive vision. And I'm saying inclusive, for example, let's do mining. Let's not let the EPA and regulation stop everything, but let's do it in a smart way. Let's not devastate the local land and people in the water table and cause a whole bunch of health issues. But if you're thinking about health, if you're thinking about the impact to nature, if you think about, well, what do you do when the mining's done stopped, and you use first principles the entire way through and KPIs, and it's holistic, there's nothing we can't achieve.
So just now, Elon just replied, and he said radical reform of government is coming that will end stifling bureaucracy, insane deficit spending, and return individual freedoms to the people. Just now, he just did that. It sounds to me, when you read that sentence, He's not just going to come in and do small things. He's coming in to
Yeah.
flash and burn and make massive changes to this system.
Yeah, he's not going to be a spectator. This is where, I mean, again, this is all our opinions, right? We're all just here speculating, but I mean, he does not go into these things with like, yeah, I'll tell you what I think and like walk away. I just think this is going to be a very kind of deep, broad exercise. So we'll see. Well, I mean, we're going to see it play out real time. I think he didn't want to be presumptuous before the election, but now, I mean, I think it's really it's journalistic malpractice to not get in front of him with a microphone and saying, "How are you going to do this and run your companies?"
Jeff, I think Twitter is a good model. He moved into the building, he worked out of the building, he still had other meetings and so forth, but for 3 to 6 months, he was sleeping in the factory all over again. And that might happen here, but he's proven that he can do that and keep the other companies going as well.
Well, I'm not questioning his bandwidth actually, even though he'll let him do that, right? But who am I to do that? I agree with you on that. I'm more of this is a there's no conflict of interest there's between Twitter and Tesla per se, even though there were a couple of issues that came up with resources, believe it or not. And that was I mean that had senators writing letters about that and trying to investigate them. So anyway, just to now think about this. This is the actual structure of the federal government. So the bigger issue, I think, Emmett, is the actual conflicts. It's not, Elon and his time. To me, the thing that he doesn't get enough credit for is the teams he's built and the structured process that, even though people think Tesla is just like a free for all rodeo, um, it, the way that they buy material, the way that they make staffing and hiring decisions, that there is a very structured culture and approach to it. I guarantee it.
I wrote Elon 2 days ago asking him urging him to do glasses and a phone. And he wrote back and he said, I have way too much on my plate right now. So to consider this, and it's his focus that he's just so focused on key things that he needs to get done, and he doesn't get distracted. So I'm not worried about him running multiple things and doing a cost-cutting effort at the government at the same time. I don't know about the legality. I think we discussed that. Is he going to have to
Why do
pull
we
out of
have
his
this
companies
conversation?
legally for a bit? I don't know.
It kind of blows my mind that we have this conversation every time Elon takes on a new role of any kind, as if this guy doesn't run 6 companies, is the richest man to ever live, and like we commend him for his delegation and then assume that any new role is going to take on the life of a full-time job for him. Like, pick
That's not
one or
what I'm
the other.
saying.
He's
That's
either
not what I'm saying.
he's either an excellent delegator who can find people he trusts and has personally evaluated their intelligence, which he's obviously exceptional at doing, and
Yeah.
and assign them to complete objectives for him, or to do research for him, or to find something out for him, or whatever else he needs done in this role, and he will be the executive manager of that process. If it's not going to take him any extraordinary amount of time.
The other thing we haven't talked about is what is the role of AI going to play in helping him identify things to cut or groups to cut or budgets to cut. I think AI plays a huge role. And if AI is running and doing this, he doesn't need to be involved too much in all the details, other than he's probably the guy to check it all over and make sure it's all rational.
Robert, I think for some of us that went without saying, but you're absolutely correct. I want to circle back to the conflict of interest point. It's a great point, but the key there is that it's a totally level playing field, that whatever is applied to everyone. There's no regulatory capture or anything like that. If you're a company, if you're an NGO, or you're an individual citizen, it's the same for everyone instead of this rules for thee but not for me. No, everyone's playing by the same rule book, and it's transparent. And those KPIs we were talking about, people all over the nation can log in and look at the dashboard, or at least portions of the dashboards that are security risk or things along those lines, but it can be a national passion, and there can be schools, like vocational schools for, hey, we need these types of skills, we need peoples with these types of mindsets. So every morning when they wake up, they go to the dashboard and say, where can I contribute today, where can I kick ass to make this new America happen? And when people have that kind of attitude and that kind of approach, and they have all the support and everything's reinforcing success, it gets magical. The same kind of passion you have at Tesla and at SpaceX, we need that within the entire government.
Just like he open sourced the algorithm and the community nodes where everybody can see what is actually happening, he may, to some degree, like, so to say, open source certain processes within the legal framework of his role. And, not necessarily just him, of course, but the whole team and administration. Like they'd be able to make it more transparent to the public and perhaps gain, like reduce the conflict of interests issue.
I really like this line of thinking of disrupting government and the way that it operates. And I think about like Trump's blockchain adoption talk and how that can impact the thinking. Right? It's like this old legacy thinking that has to just go away, and that's what Elon does. It's just he's entered a new market, which is politics, and he's going to disrupt it and bring it into modern times.
Okay. I think we lost the speaker there, JP. Or no, he's not up.
Yeah, and I'm in Spain on vacation. It's 1:20 in the morning here, so I got to go. Thank you so much for a great show.
No, thank you,
Thanks for
Robert.
coming, Robert. Yeah, I mean, I really go ahead, Alexander.
No, I just wanted to annotate that I forgot to ask Richard the question about Delaware, but he's gone now, so let's keep that for next time.
Xander, what were you going to say or ask?
I was just gonna say, like your passion comes through so much, and I think that's exactly what's missing from the education, from the workforce. This whole quietly quitting business, just showing up and collecting a paycheck, like that whole thing really needs to change in government and jobs, right? Like people hating going to work. It's so inefficient. And yeah, I like the refreshing ideas of looking like how things are done in well organized companies, which is that's what the government is, right? It's just what does Elon say, a corporation in the limit or something.
Elon said, make Star Trek real. So make the Federation real, but the Federation, part of it is what you're talking about, Xander. People being stoked and the society based around contributing and working together to make great things happen. Because there's so much we can do if we're not pitting citizens against one another, or we're not creating educational fiefdoms where, oh, this is the elite and you have to have $300,000 or $400,000 so you can get a 4-year degree, and that whole thing. If that's just gone, and it's, what do you have skills in? What are you passionate about? Okay, we'll train you and go do it because we have need.
Okay, guys, we're gonna shut it down. Great conversation. We covered quite a bit of space here. We even had Richard Hoffman, a lawyer, join us. Please join us tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to do a live stream on my channel, YouTube, but we're also going to do it in each of our X accounts. Plus, we're going to try to do it also on a space as well. Join us then. We're going to talk about Tesla stock. What's the impact to Tesla stock with the jump today? And we're going to share what other institutional analysts are thinking about it, and how has anything, if anything, has changed about Tesla. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.